So good afternoon and welcome back. My name is Michele Trizio, and first of all, I would like to thank the organizer of this wonderful event for this opportunity. My name is Michele Trizio, as I said, and I am interested in Byzantine philosophy, and I'm a specialist in Byzantine philosophy who works presently at the University of Bari. Theodore Metochites is surely one of the most eminent figures of what has been called the early Paleologan Renaissance. Among other things, Theodore wrote poems, commentaries on Aristotle, an introductory astronomical work, a series of literary essays known as Semeioses Donikai, and several orations. However, several of his works have not as yet been translated into English, which explains why some of his works, in particular the orations, have not received the attention they deserve. One of these, known as Ethikos or Concerning Education, is a highly sophisticated manifesto of proper living and ethical guidance, a text that vehiculates the self-representation of a 14th century Byzantine intellectual. We are in the fortunate condition to have with us today the author of the first ever English translation of the Ethikos, Sophia Xenophontos. Hi, Sophia, and thanks for being here. I will just say a few words on Sophia's background. She's a lecturer in classics at the University of Glasgow, and she's the author of Ethical Education in Plutarch, Moralizing Agent and Context in 2017. She is also the author of several articles and book chapters on practical ethics and the therapy of the emotions in post-Hellenistic philosophical writings. And she has co-edited the Brill Companion to the Reception of Plutarch and is about to publish a volume on the reception of Greek ethics in late antiquity and Byzantium. She is currently preparing the first critical edition and English translation of George Pachymeres' commentary on Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics for the Commentary on Aristotle in Greek et Byzantina series. So I would like to thank Sophia for being here, and I would like to ask her what have been the challenges she had to face when translating this very important work. Sophia, the stage is yours.
Thank you. So hello everyone, and thank you very much for joining this session. I am very grateful to Petros for including me in this fascinating event, the first of its kind globally. And a big thank you goes to Michele for his wonderful introduction. I will just share my screen. Just a second, please. Right. Okay, so today I would like to present my book, which is the first English translation of Theodore Metochites' oration entitled On Morals or Concerning Education. In doing so, I will first briefly contextualize the work and its author. Then I will explain using specific examples why this text might be of interest not just to experts, but also to non-academic audiences. And finally, I will give you an idea of the challenges I encountered while putting this book together. First things first, the author. When we talk about Theodore Metochites, we talk about a grand figure. He lived and operated in Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, in the second half of the 13th century and the first half of the 14th, in what has been described as a peculiar period, both politically and intellectually. Politically, the empire's frontiers were gradually shrinking, and while the Byzantines were facing their external enemies, they were also caught up in internal conflicts that resulted in serious financial difficulties. As a counterweight to these gloomy circumstances affecting the state, culture was reaching a peak thanks to a structured revival of classical Greek scholarship. Now, my reference to the political and intellectual landscape of late Byzantium is not purely about history. Rather, it relates to Metochites' dual role in this age as an active statesman who at the height of his political career became a sort of prime minister, but who was also an ardent participant in the Paleologan revival of Greek letters I have just described. His enormous output, as Michele has already mentioned, includes works on astronomy and natural philosophy, a miscellaneous collection on a variety of subjects, poetry, and 18 orations, one of which is the On Morals. So, what is this work exactly? It is an exhortation to lead a philosophically informed and morally upright life. Therefore, one of its most important functions is to provide moral guidance. To that end, Metochites makes use of traditional mechanisms from ancient ethics designed to ensure peace of mind. For example, he often emphasizes the changeability of human fate as a contrast to the stability of philosophy and virtue, so as to render the latter attractive options in life. He also provides cognitive strategies familiar from Stoic psychotherapy, but he embeds them in a Byzantine setting to enable his contemporaries to manage their disturbing emotions and reform the way they think about the world and behave in it. One such strategy is the premeditation of future calamities, a theory that hypothesizes that by anticipating negative experiences, we are in a better position to mitigate their emotional impact when they actually arise. Another strategy, as you can see from this slide, is the doctrine that suggests that we should not be aggrieved about situations that we cannot control, situations that are not up to us, efimine. And yet another that says we need to have a clear understanding that only happiness matters in life, while everything else, including fame and wealth, are moral indifference, that is, aspects that do not affect individual flourishing. Now, these rationalizing techniques described in On Morals offer unique insights into the moral climate of late Byzantium and emphasize the need for a comprehensive study of this overlooked topic. Beyond that, they help us see what moral factors affected the Byzantines and how they were dealt with, potentially leading us to make fruitful comparisons with our own ethical challenges today and perhaps apply some of these psychotherapeutic practices recorded in On Morals. Having discussed the moralizing aspects of the work, I shall now turn to its function as a source for social and cultural history. One of the hotly disputed issues in 14th century Byzantine society is the distinction between the active and contemplative life and the social position of scholars. In conceptualizing his ideal version of the educated man, Metochites stresses the competition among peers, the gossip, fierce envy, and malicious abuse he and others had to face. Nonetheless, he insists that thanks to the consolation that comes from studying, the educated man will be able to face all the predicaments of professional life. For Metochites, intellectual work is an invigorating activity. Delving into the books of the ancients for philosophical and historical information is a path towards tranquility and bliss. I quote a relevant passage. Spending time in a green and flowery place furnishes weary eyes with a very pleasant and genuinely great relief, especially for a cultivated and highly educated man, I think, who is agitated and disturbed by the vicissitudes of life. Communion with wisdom and its blooming meadows brings enormous relaxation and calm to his mind once he turns and inclines in its direction. And his seeking refuge in wisdom renders his soul gentle and calm, while the acceptance it provides and its fertility and hospitality make his soul bear the sad events nobly. How topical this is, Don't we often feel that work therapy is sometimes our only relief from the home confinement we're subjected to due to the pandemic? This brings me to my third point on the importance of the On Morals, which has to do with its resourceful reception of the classical tradition. In establishing his notion of intellectual pleasure stemming from reading and learning, as evinced in the passage we have just read, Metochites creates a strong counterpart to the idea of Epicurean hedonism, which he revises. So according to Metochites, unlike Epicurean hedonism, which animates the lower part of the soul, that's the part dealing with passions and desires, intellectual hedonism can assist the rational faculty of the soul to regulate bewildering passions. Now, this is a minor instance of reception, but as I've shown elsewhere, there are major examples of creative revival in Metochites, such as his reading of Plutarch. On Morals can also function as autobiography. There are several junctures in the text at which the author's inner reflections and anxieties loom large. Metochites, so he tells us, is particularly tormented by his family commitments and overloaded political schedule, which do not allow him enough time for scholarly endeavors. These narratives are very rich in descriptions of emotions and therefore can offer an avenue to the study of late Byzantine affective discourse. Now, this is another topic which is still at an embryonic stage. I could go on talking about this work for hours, were it not for time constraints. I could also have referred to the way it reflects ongoing debates regarding the philosophy of religion, or talk about its relevance to issues of metaphysics and astronomy. But I won't, hoping that I've given you enough reasons to get hold of the book, read it, and be informed and hopefully inspired by it. Let me finish my presentation with a note on the translation process, which was both intellectually demanding and time-consuming. It took 7 years to complete. My aim has been to provide a readable English text while reflecting the original Greek locutions, but this was not always possible. We all know that Metochites' prose is notoriously convoluted and dense, and it is obscured by the use of abstract terminology and intricate syntax. Periods can be as long as 20 lines of printed text, and repetitions and superfluous lexical items made the translation even more daunting. Multivalency of meaning was another big challenge. For example, in rendering the term logos proved particularly tricky. Depending on context, I sometimes translated it as education in its broadest sense, learning. At other times, as the faculty of reason contrasted to passions, or a literary work, especially an oration, and at other times simply word or statement. And of course, in religious contexts, logos had to be translated as Christ or divine word. So this is just one example of multivalency of meaning. The whole enterprise required extensive communication with colleagues and collaborators, whom I thank wholeheartedly for their contribution. I'm especially grateful to the X series editor, Alice Mary Talbot, the managing editor, Nicole Eddy, and my assigned readers from Da Barton Oak's Medieval Library series, Niels Gaul and Alexander Alexakis, for providing many helpful comments on the translation. I would also like to thank Ioannis Polemis for informal communication and for consenting to the reproduction of his critical edition accompanying my translation. So I would like to conclude on a positive note by saying that this book was more than worthwhile, not for adding another item to my publication list, but rather for making me even more acutely aware of how profitable Greek ethics is as a research area. I've been working on this area for more than a decade, and yet texts like Metochites on morals make me realize that while art is long, life is quite short. So it is this open-endedness of Greek ethics and its reception in later periods, especially in Byzantium, that continues to excite me. So yes, please read the book if you can, and hopefully you won't regret it. Thank you.